Hi, my name is Colin. Seeing things with a new perspective can change us. I love photography and I take a lot of photos. And what I find is that you can gain a new or better understanding when you see landscapes or objects from a new perspective. Have you ever walked or driven by something every day for most of your life and it's always there but you don't really see it? Take for example the super tall cell phone tower on the east side of Steinbach. Most of us have seen it like this and no other way, but I bet most of you have never seen it from the perspective of what is holding up the tower. When you see things from a new perspective, you can gain new insight and appreciation of it. I find the same thing when I read the Bible. It gives you a new perspective on life and why we are here. And Jesus in Matthew 17 was teaching the disciples a new perspective. Now, please pause the video and read Matthew 17. In Matthew 17, I can see that Jesus was deliberately teaching the disciples a new and better perspective of who he is. For a while, they've been following him, but amazingly, they didn't fully understand who he is. Verses 1 to 13 shares with us this extremely cool experience that Peter, James, and John experienced when Jesus was transfigured before them and some of his heavenly glory was displayed to them. They even heard God the Father say, "This is my Son, who I love. With him I am well pleased. Listen to him." Whoa, new perspective. They already knew that Jesus was something different and special, but to hear that from God directly? Wow. Then he told them that they were not to tell anyone until the Son of Man had been raised from the dead. I marvel that a few chapters later in the story, Peter denied Jesus. And he did this in spite of all he had experienced. His eyes were opened in this chapter and his perspective was changed, but it shows how easily he forgets about it and also, out of fear, rejected what Jesus had said or done. I realized that Jesus was teaching the disciples and us a new perspective of who he is and that he is worth following, but they and us as well needed a few more examples of this new perspective. Next, Jesus heals a demon-possessed boy and talks about faith and how a tiny mustard seed of faith can move mountains. Jesus was showing them that faith in him is key, not faith in ourselves. Another new perspective. Then Jesus gave them his prediction of his death and resurrection, but it seems as though their personal perspective hadn't been changed yet because they grieved. They only heard the death part, not him being raised to life. Jesus was still training them on getting the right perspective. Jesus' new perspective was that his death was the key to real life with him. But it is so impressive how patient that Jesus was in helping them see a new perspective. He even used one of the oddest miracles in the Bible to change their perspective. Now reread verses 24 to 27 of chapter 17 again. Wow, paying temple taxes by fishing for a fish with 2 loonies in its mouth? What does that mean? Imagine this. Peter has just seen Jesus transfigured, Jesus heal a demon-possessed boy, be floored by Jesus' prediction of his death, a roller coaster chapter. I almost imagine that it happened all in a day or two. Then someone asks about the temple tax. What a mundane question. The roller coaster comes to a stop with a question. Doesn't your teacher pay the temple tax? It almost feels like a passing question and a non-issue in the story of Christ. So Peter answers a simple yes. And at that point, Peter probably forgot it and moved on with his day. Sometime later in the day, Jesus hits him with a question, the classic teacher-styled question. Peter, what do you think? Do the kings of earth collect taxes from children or others? Peter was probably racking his brain for the right Jesus answer and said, from others? Probably hoping that he got the answer right. And he did. Then Jesus replied with, then the children are exempt. What does that mean? I'll explain. The temple tax was a tax for the upkeep of the temple. At age 20, they were to pay this tax, roughly a day's wages, once a year. But why did Jesus say children are exempt? It becomes obvious when you realize that Jesus is God's Son, and the temple was God the Father's dwelling place. Therefore, as God's Son, Jesus doesn't need to pay it. Whoa, new perspective again. Jesus is continuing to teach the disciples about who he is and what his character is. And guess what? When we follow Jesus, we also become children of God. And the tax can be exempt for us as well. Whoa, new perspective again. The story goes on, and I really love it, that Jesus still decides to pay the tax because it is right to pay it for the sakes of others around us. But he does it in style by having Peter go fishing and find the coins in the fish's mouth. So odd and so cool. It's stories like this that move me and change my perspective. I'm going to close with this. Many of us read the Bible or know the stories from the Bible, and unfortunately, those stories no longer impact us. They have become too normal or just a story from an old book. This is my challenge to you. Read and enjoy the Bible afresh. Read it to gain a new perspective about who God is and what he has done for us. It'll allow you to grow closer to God and truly begin to understand who he is and what he has done for us.